Kenmore City Council is now in session. Pursuant to RCW 43.30.110(1)(I), the City Council will now enter into executive session to discuss pending or potential litigation. The executive session is slated to last 60 minutes. Kenmore City Council is leaving executive session. We're adjourning. There's no action from the executive session. We're adjourning the special meeting, calling the regular meeting to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Baker,
Present.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Kugler,
Present.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Mayor Herbig,
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Present.
Councilmember File,
Present.
all present.
Please, please join me in the flag salute.
Of the United States of America. Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda, we have approval of the agenda. Unless there are any objections, the agenda will stand approved. Seeing no objections, the agenda is approved. Next, we have two presentations. First one is to introduce new staff. We have Development Services Senior Permit Coordinator Kendra Hixenbaugh and Community Development Administrative Specialist Shannon Tipple-Leen. If I mangled any of that, I apologize. They don't put pronouncers on the agenda, so.
Good evening, Council. So tonight we have Kendra Hixenbaugh as a Senior Permit Coordinator for Development Services. We're excited to have her. She has great experience from municipalities like King County, City of Berrien, and Mercer Island. So we just want to welcome you, Kendra. Did you want to say anything?
Hi, I'm Kendra. It's very nice to meet you all, and I'm very excited to work with the city of King County, or sorry, Kenmore, coming from King County. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here, and I'm really excited to learn new things about this jurisdiction and also bring what I know and work together to help each other. So, thank you.
Good evening, Council. I am very excited to introduce Shannon Tipple-Leen, who is the new part-time administrative specialist in the Community Development Department. Shannon has some great administrative background working in some nonprofits. She also has an art background and likes photography, and you'll notice she has some very interesting jewelry. So I am fascinated. So that's a couple of interesting fun facts about Shannon. We're happy to have her here. She's going to be a great asset to the team. So Shannon, thank you.
So I'm interested in learning more about
Thank you. Councilmember Baker, did you have a comment?
Yeah.
Councilmember Baker.
Your mic on, sorry.
I've only been here for a few years. It's not like I don't know. Yeah, I want to welcome you guys. It's really a pleasure to meet you, and I'm sure we'll see you around, but you're joining a fabulous staff. I think we really appreciate our existing staff and how hard they work for us, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to introduce Bothell Kenmore Chambers Executive Director, Danah Abarr. Sorry again if I mangled that.
No problem. Hi, my name is Danah, and I am the new Executive Director for the Bothell Kenmore Chamber, or as we refer to it in Kenmore, the Kenmore Bothell Chamber. And I've already met with several city officials and dozens of business owners in Kenmore. Really enjoy spending time and getting to know everyone, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
I think we're all looking forward to working with you too. It's there's a lot of energy at the chamber, and you're stepping in, I think, during a really interesting time with a lot of very motivated members. So welcome.
Agreed. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Next on the agenda, actually, we had 3 presentations. Next is King County Metro Lynnwood Link Phase 2, presented by Government Relations Jurisdictional Lead Amanda Pleasant Brown, Lynnwood Link Connects Deputy Project Manager Corey Holder, and Lynnwood Link Connections Lead Luke Distelhorst. Take it over.
Nailed it. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members for your time this evening. Yes, we are the government. We are the team here at King County Metro here to present on phase 2 of the Lynnwood Link project. So this is the first time that the public and you have seen our draft concept network. So we're really here just to get your feedback and just to tell you where we are in the process and to give you an update on our community engagement. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Corey to give us your presentation, and give me just a moment and I will share my screen.
All right, thanks, Amanda. Good evening, everyone. My name's Corey Holder. I'm the project manager here on the Lynnwood Links Connection Mobility Project. Next slide, please. First, just to give a little background on the Lynnwood Link Mobility Project. The reason for this is that in 2024 and 2026, Sound Transit will be extending Link Light Rail to include 5 new stations from Seattle to Lynnwood, and also implementing a new bus rapid transit line along the State Route 522 corridor. So to prepare for this service expansion, respond to changing mobility needs, and improve mobility access for historically underserved populations, Metro initiated a mobility project in Northwest King County. This project will deliver an updated mobility network that connects with Sound Transit Link Light Rail and also integrates with Sound Transit and community transit services. And we're doing this project in coordination with Sound Transit. And we also want to note that Community Transit is currently carrying out a network design as well to see how their network should change with the new Sound Transit services. One of their changes that will see an impact within King County includes extending their Swift Blue line to the Shoreline North 185th Street station. So just looking here, the 4 stations opening in 2024 listed are Shoreline South at 148th, Shoreline North at 185th, Mount Lake Terrace and Lynnwood City Center. And then coming later in 2026 would be an infill station at Northeast 130th Street. And next slide. So I want to talk a bit about the project scope of what we're looking at for this project. So we're considering 22 routes as part of the project for potential change. 14 of those are all-day routes. 8 of those are peak-only routes. And looking at the map, the area in yellow that's highlighted here, this is our project area we're really considering. Looking at this as the areas where we want to engage with folks who live or ride in the area. So kind of really reaching out and targeting that. Those routes we're looking at are also the ones that within this area that interact with Link. So either kind of crossing where one of the future stations will be or traveling along the Link pathways. So really looking at engaging on those is where we can really impact with this Link expansion coming, and also looking at that 522 corridor where Sound Transit will be adding that BRT service. All right, so project goals. So kind of go over our main 4 goals for the project. Number 1, first and foremost, is improving mobility for priority populations as defined by the mobility framework. And those those priority populations as defined by Metro are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, people with low or no income, people with disabilities, diverse language speakers, and immigrants and refugees. And also, we want to make sure we're equitably informing, engaging, and empowering potential future customers traveling within that project area. So really wanting to make sure we hear from those priority populations just mentioned. Also wanting to deliver an integrated service that responds to Link expansion and these changes in the transit network and community needs. So really want to, allow Link to focus on what it does best, is really carrying a lot of people, quickly and efficiently. So really leveraging that asset and making sure our network maximizes that gain. And overall, doing this looking to improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and environmental sustainability of our transit system. And all these goals are consistent with the restructuring goals in our updated service guidelines at Metro. And I'll hand off to Luke for a moment to talk about our engagement timeline.
Good evening, everyone. Luke Distelhorst, they use he, him pronouns. I'm the community engagement lead for the Lynnwood Link Connections project. So currently we are in phase 2 right there, kind of midway through the entire project. As Amanda mentioned, this is the first time we've gone out to the public to share these service concepts and gather feedback. In early 2022, our phase 1 engagement allowed our communities to identify their mobility needs. And following that phase 1 needs assessment you see there in blue, we engaged our mobility board, which is made up of residents from the project area, as well as our partner review board to help refine these needs and guide the project team in developing the service concepts that we are sharing today. That Partner Review Board also includes jurisdictional staff such as Kenmore, partner agencies, and local organizations. During this phase 2 period, we're gathering feedback on how well the concept network addresses those community priority needs, considering the trade-offs that we must make in the project. Given that this is the first time everyone has seen the concept network, we're looking for your feedback, the public's feedback, so we can help address any questions or gaps that have kind of arisen in the network. So the phase 2 engagement feedback will then help us further develop and refine the service concept to produce a more final service proposal that we will take back to the public again in phase 3 to collect additional feedback on ways to refine and improve it. So following that phase 3 engagement, we'll then go eventually to the King County Council for adoption and later implementation. You'll see that we have that big yellow box around phase 3 in the King County Council process. So we're still waiting for some final details on our partners at Sound Transit about what those link extension opening dates are. And that will impact our phase 3 and final timeline. But right now we're roughly planning to have that phase 3 public engagement probably mid-2023, sometime around the summer. I think I'll hand it back to Corey now. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, before we kind of go over some of the high-level network changes, I want to go over a few key assumptions we're making in developing this network. So first of all, when the network we propose here is looking at a final network of all these changes. So as mentioned earlier, we have some stations opening in 2024, another station in 26, and BRT in 2026. So this is proposing, what it would look like when all of those are completed. As we get later into the project, there may be parts we need to look at phasing of how it would be implemented, but what you're seeing is kind of the final change proposed that would integrate all of those openings together. Second, bring up as we've done in other metro mobility projects recently, there are no additional investments in the network. This is budget neutral, so we're working off of all the existing hours of the project area routes as mentioned earlier. So this does involve trade-offs when we look at this, that if we're increasing frequency on one route or adding new coverage in another area, it means reducing from another route within that project area. So definitely some trade-off decisions in there as we decide where the most service goes. And lastly, capital constraints I'll mentioned. So there are could potentially be capital constraints in the near term towards implementing all changes we want. For example, we can only deliver a set number of new stops and improvements, both within not just budget, but within timelines by the time this was would be implemented. So really need to keep capital constraints in mind. All right, so what has informed this concept network that we're going to talk about? So first of all, on the left in the yellow, looking at data analysis or the inputs for the foundation for this work. So some of the things this included was origin and destination travel trends. So this kind of helped us form a set of major connections made by riders or potential riders, gauged by engagement feedback from phase 1. Also looking at equity priority areas, and what those are the block group levels within King County that have the highest numbers of those priority populations, as I mentioned earlier. So these are community members we really want to hear from and make sure they're served by our transit. And also looking at current ridership crowding and productivity. So this helps us determine, some suggested best changes we'd make to make the best use of our resources. Second, and kind of where we're at now, as Luke was just mentioning, is community input. We're in phase 2 now, but looking at that, that also has helped develop our proposal that in phase one, we conducted community engagement last year from February to June, which included survey, direct engagement with writers, mobility board meetings, and partner review board meetings. So this really helped us hear needs and develop a proposed network that responds to those needs. And that engagement was summarized into two major items that help plan this network. So one was priority mobility needs, which the network seeks to directly address, and also important connections and destination. So this helped inform specific route concepts, such as how the pathway of the route would look. And the last consideration of the network is capital infrastructure, as mentioned around capital constraints just a moment ago. So we have to consider where it is possible to lay over a bus so that operators can rest in between trips. So that definitely puts limitations on where we can do service of having to have a location, that works for that break and those kind of end of the route facilities. And yeah, some limits there. But all three of these areas of input formed our network decisions and considered a combination of our engagement input, equity impacts, and service design best practices. So speaking of mobility needs, so these are our top mobility needs that were developed from our phase one outreach that informed this concept network. So first, we heard a top priority was creating new and improved east-west transit connections. There's a lot of good north-south connections in parts of areas, but east-west can be a lot more challenging. So we heard that as a top need that we really tried to deliver some new east-west connections in the network. So also providing transit to and from important community identified destinations where priority populations travel and work and live, and also thinking about locations where it'll have dense housing development plans by the time the network is implemented. Also looking at improving nighttime transit service, serving major important destinations. So looked at opportunities where we could extend service later in the evening than it is today. Also really maintaining and improving frequencies on routes that connect to and from major destinations. Also looking at improving weekend transit service where we can. I know, since the pandemic, weekend service is something we've seen kind of rebound at a higher rate than weekday service. So that's something that's really been an emerging priority as we go through mobility projects. And lastly, ensuring that these transit transfers are convenient, accessible, and reliable, especially for priority populations. So now taking a look at the network, the map on the right is showing the current proposed network. Just for some reference there, the red lines on the map are kind of our frequent services in this network. So you see a lot of kind of frequent connections going near light rail stations, trying to enable that. But yeah, I'll go through how this network addresses those kind of 6 mobility needs we heard. First, speaking to those east-west connections. So this network includes 7 new and revised routes that are making all-day east-west connections. So for example on that, there's especially some new east-west connections in Shoreline across 145th, 155th, 175th, 185th, and 205th. So kind of seeing all these east-west red lines crisscrossing by I-5 there. So that's some new options. And also making sure there's a east-west connection between Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, and Shoreline. So, the green line kind of on the top of the map. And besides the east-west connections, also looking at transit service in areas where needs are greatest. And, as mentioned, this is a budget neutral network. So that means we had to move resources and make trade-offs in the network. So currently this network prioritizes serving community identified destinations and equity priority areas and locations with kind of growing housing density and development. And speaking about night service as well, a big need we heard. So one example where we're filling kind of better night service in this network is the proposed Route 334. Which through Kenmore is traveled by the 331, but this Route 334 is proposed to travel much later into the evening than Route 331 does today. And kind of overall night service in the network, we do see in this proposal, there's an average of about 40 minutes later service into the evening than it is today throughout the proposal. Right, and maintaining or improving frequency need we heard. So based on both our analysis and our engagement feedback, we made improvements to frequencies on routes that connect to major destinations, have higher ridership, and connect to link or other frequent services. And when you're comparing this network to today, there's about a 19% increase in people who have access to the frequent transit network over today, which is about 20,000 more people than have today that have access to that frequent network, which we define as 15-minute or better service throughout the day. More trips on weekends. So filling gaps on the weekend service as well is a priority that we heard. And one example in this network that has weekend service that doesn't exist today is there's proposed route 324 that travels from Bothell to Kenmore, Lake Forest Park and Lake City connection. Today's Route 372 does not have weekend service on the route, but in this proposal, this would have both Saturday and Sunday service on new Route 324. And for lastly, the sixth one was providing frequent to frequent transfers between destinations. We heard this, in our phase one engagement that this transfer was a big priority. So we tried to provide frequent to frequent bus service transfers where we could. And examples, you can see all the kind of red lines on the map connecting at Link, providing a lot of these transfers. And yeah, there's kind of how the network responds to those mobility needs. So are some general, high level, there are a lot of trade-offs involved in developing the network, delivering on those top needs that service has to come from one place to address another. So some of the ways we made that was in general, reducing peak only services to improve all day and frequent service. Within the network, there are two of the network concept routes. There are two peak-only routes remaining in the proposal. And we'll mention that one of those does serve Kenmore. So of the two peak-only routes remaining, one is Route 322, which travels to First Hill. In the network, this one is actually proposed for improved frequency, where it would be every 15 minutes during the peak compared to 30 minutes today. And it would also serve Northgate Station on the way to First Hill as well, offering a frequent to frequent transfer there as well. And generally looking in, making this happen when I'm speaking of, peak only routes, of reorienting that. One way of making this possible is reorienting that north-south connection for Link to be the spine providing that. And when you look at these east-west connections, make that transfer at Link, providing that spine, getting into downtown Seattle with frequent service, providing, more frequent connection there. And lastly, looking through the routes is opportunities where we can reduce unproductive or low ridership service or segments on routes that we can provide more frequent service elsewhere. And with that, I'll hand it back to Luke, who can speak about our engagement.
Thanks, Corey. And so now we'll just touch a bit upon the phase two engagement that we're doing right now. So since this is the first time that the public gets to review the network, it includes a few more items than we did in phase one, as you can see here. So we're still primarily collecting feedback through an online survey, which has seen good engagement so far. We've also partnered with local community-based organizations to support our outreach and are hosting some specific meetings with different community groups that we've identified throughout the project area, such as educational institutions and income-eligible housing providers. So far, we've hosted 2 of our 3 online virtual open houses. We do have our last one coming up on Monday, February 27th at 6 p.m. And these also include live interpretation in 3 other languages as well. After this engagement ends, just like you saw on that timeline earlier, we'll go back to our mobility board and our partner review board, like we did after phase one, to help evaluate and prioritize the feedback that we're hearing now in phase two, to then develop that phase 3 proposal. Next slide, please. So a few items I just wanted to highlight from our general outreach. One being the amount of in-person outreach time we have during the second phase. This is mostly focused at transit centers, park and rides, high ridership locations, some of those trade-off locations that we've identified in the network, as well as some community spots that we know people in the community visit on a regular basis. So in total, we've had about 15 hours per week over this entire project, just for that in-person outreach element. Specific to Kenmore, we've been out at the Kenmore Park and Ride, Kenmore Library, as well as reached out and delivered materials both digitally and in print to a number of local spots and organizations. And I've really thanked some Kenmore staff who helped out identifying some of those parties that we should reach out to in that process. Next slide, please. So the CBOs that we've partnered with in this project are the Lake City Collective, Compass Housing. I think you can go forward one, Amanda. Thanks. Lake City Collective, Compass Housing, 18 Seeds, which is an affiliate of the Ethnic Chamber of Commerce Coalition, and then Black Coffee Northwest as well in Shoreline. So these partnerships are really trying to integrate our work into the outreach and engagement that these organizations are already doing in their communities, with a special focus on priority populations. So in addition to promoting the survey and our outreach and other engagement opportunities, our open house, they're also collecting some qualitative feedback as well, and then are reporting back to Metro on what they're hearing and any other additional needs or gaps that they've identified in their communities. Next slide, please. Thanks. So our survey is open through March 10th. We started on January 9th, so we're just about halfway through. We have 4 weeks left and are still collecting a lot of engagement. We've seen a lot of survey results come in. We've visited a lot of community meetings, been giving similar presentations to this and getting a lot of feedback. That's really exciting to see people react to the network. We do have everything available in our 12 project languages, which are listed here. When we have that final virtual open house, the interpretation is in Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese. If anyone has an additional interpretation request, we can definitely facilitate that. If we get about 48 or 72 hours notice, we'll arrange for additional interpretation. Lastly, I just want to say that we're always looking for ways to improve and to incorporate more voices in our work. I know we got some recommendations from staff. We heard from you all, mayor and council members, last time we were here at the end of November, and are always open to that feedback and seeking that. That's why we're here. And so, any ideas, any feedback you all have, we're definitely more than willing to work that into the work we're doing right now. And now I'll hand it back to Amanda.
Thank you so much, team. So council members, mayor, deputy mayors, council members, we're here to answer questions and get some feedback.
Questions, comments? Councilmember Kugler.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming tonight and giving this update on the Lynnwood link. I'm not a regular daily commuter, so I'm super excited about having some stops on the link light rail that are closer to Kenmore versus having to go to Northgate. I'm wondering if you have any more specifics on the projected opening dates of any of the shoreline stations. Do you guys have approximates by any chance that you're able to share publicly at this time or not?
Yeah, I'd say for our project targeted changes for like the beginning of it, we're looking at fall of 2024. Our service change to coincide with the nearest link opening. It's looking to be pretty close to that time. Our fall 2024 service change would be in August of 2024. So looking to do that service change that would sync up closest to that opening.
Yeah, and like you, we're still waiting for Sound Transit for some final dates. So we're in the same holding pattern.
Yeah.
Okay. And so fall would be for both of those shoreline stations or?
Yeah, the plan
Or-
is both shoreline stations, the 148th and the 185th and Mount Lake Terrace and Lynnwood would all open at the same time. The only one that's planned to open later is 130th Street.
Okay, great. I also was just curious whether the team did any community outreach with Bastyr University, which is located here in Kenmore. I know it's a smaller university as compared to like UW Bothell, but I wonder if they might have some service requests themselves. And certainly because they're located in our community, we want to make sure they have a voice and participate in this process.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. That's a great tip. I'm not sure if we have reached out to them in this current phase, and that's something we can do with the 4 weeks that we still have left.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, thanks for this update. It's exciting to see the work progressing. A couple of things, just, you know, when you look at this map of the area, there's two things that kind of, you know, become obvious pretty quickly. I mean, we're in the upper right-hand portion of it, and there's two things missing in that section. One is red, which is frequent service, and two, no stars, so no CBO partners. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how we can fill those gaps. One thought I had, I was kind of excited to hear about the 322 increased frequency, and maybe that could potentially be expanded.
Yeah, we'll note one on the map is, you know, we didn't call out Sound Transit's 522 future Stride BRT along that corridor as frequent, but that will be a frequent service, you know, for highlighting as their own metro routes, it'd be red on the map. So that is one frequent that will be in that corridor as well.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, that timing on that is significantly later than the opening of these two stops. So that's why I'm kind of calling it out now, because we don't really have that frequency. So if there's an interim measure that could be put into place, that would be great. And then if you have comments on the CBOs that you might partner with in our area, that'd be great too.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can definitely look into. We're always trying to get more partners, and maybe we can follow up with you or city staff on potentially helping identify some groups in the area.
Any other questions? I just have one comment, and I'm pretty sure I said something very similar last time you all were here, but looking at that map, the only lines that you're calling out are ones that are running down 522. Those are very important lines. They're going to get us to links. They're going to get us to 405 BRT. But many of our neighborhoods don't have a connection to the BRT or to the other service along Bothell Way. And we know the system access is a huge issue. We've been making investments in sidewalks and bike lanes and that sort of thing to get people to Bothell Way. But at some point there needs to be an investment, and it'd be great to see some service hours put into some, you know, peak commuter time neighborhood loops or something. We used to have a bus that ran up 68th and ran down 61st, and it gave folks away who lived in those neighborhoods to access the rest of the transit network that they truly at this point can't access unless they want to, you know, bike down. Well, actually they can walk down now since we built sidewalks along most of that route, but it's still incredibly difficult. It's a long walk. It's a long bike ride. And I would really like to see Metro, you know, as you've reconfigured to serve Link north-south through like the spine of Seattle, I would really like to see that similar sort of investments along these Sound Transit BRT lines as they free up service hours in a similar way that Link frees up some of your other service hours. So I'm going to keep bugging you about that. But other than that, I really appreciate the presentation. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo what the mayor just said, and it was a crucial route that went up 61st past a lot of dense housing and multifamily housing, and then up and around and back down 68th. And there's definitely, you know, still a need for it. So I just strongly echo what he said. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councilmember Kugler.
I thought of one additional question, and that is, during this phase where ridership has decreased during like COVID, and I'm guessing that it must be sort of difficult to know, like, where is ridership going to go back up? Where is it kind of plateaued? What is changing temporarily versus permanently? So how are you making some of those judgment calls? And like, what could we expect for, like, if there was certain demand that increases, as like staffing allows and buses allow and all of that, like, how could we expect that to come back online or change in the future?
Yeah, I can add in kind of our existing conditions analysis too. We did kind of run both pre and post pandemic numbers as well for some comparison, where that was applicable on the routes. But yeah, looking at, some 2019 ridership as well as 2021 to have kind of a couple baselines there to think about that as we do it. And also just, I think we've seen some kind of trends that were reflected itself in the needs we were hearing of kind of, some of the weekend and off-peak travel has been kind of recovering more than peak, which, was also reflected in the needs. So those were some things we were kind of thinking about in the network. But I think in general, as things are returning, we'll definitely rely on our service guidelines, indicating where kind of service growth would go for needs of, crowding or reliability issues as kind of ridership recovers in areas that will help drive it, as well as kind of looking at a general kind of service recovery plan as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to add really quickly, we do have a service recovery ordinance right now that is going through the legislative process and looking at how that engagement will happen through projects like this to kind of prioritize and meet those near-term needs about how we recover differently than the 2019 kind of pre-COVID system existed. We want to make sure that we're recovering the system in a way that, as you mentioned, is meeting those current and future needs and different travel patterns that we're seeing in the network.
Deputy Mayor?
First, I want to just say that I echo the majority of the comments from our council this evening. I really appreciate the attention given to Bastyr University, an incredibly important resource in Kenmore and the region. There are many students at Bastyr who live in Seattle and other cities that need access, bus access, transit access to this location. So the one thing that I'm just going to reiterate or ask, I'm going to choose to put this as, I'm going to ask that as you're doing this work, remembering that the goal is to get more riders. What's happened here in Kenmore isn't necessarily increasing ridership, and even in the next few years. Our goal during this time, in the middle of a climate crisis, where we have too many cars on the road, is to get more people in transit to get to their places of work, because not everyone's going to be able to telework. Also, for me and my family and other people in our community, on the weekends to have as ease of access to get to the places they want to go via transit as during the week. I'm always disappointed to see only commuter hours, because people work service jobs. There are so many different forms of work and need for transit that these limitations, I know that you're working from a place of budgets and limitation. And I really encourage the vision and daring to drive to get beyond budgets. I don't know how we're going to get there, but it's so important for us to have the transit to get people out of cars. You're here to do that, and I'm proud of the work that you're doing. And I know that you have limitations, but keep pushing. We are not getting what we need here in Kenmore with this plan. I'm just going to say it, but I know you're trying. Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, well, thank you so much for your time this evening. We really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for your time, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. And I just want to say we are a transit agency, we're a mobility agency, and we absolutely want to provide service. And we do have some challenges, but we are working on them. And we really appreciate your time and feedback tonight. And we will take it back and ensure that we have responses for phase 3. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have an update on for our Where's the Fun segment now for the Love of Kenmore event debrief.
Thank you, Your Honor. You might be seeing that agenda item on future city council meeting agendas. Where's the fun? We might be the only city around with that as a continuing regular agenda item. So thank you so much for coming to For the Love of Kenmore event last Thursday night, and my coworkers as well. This is the thing I wanted to highlight when we're answering the question, where's the fun for this meeting? But Michelle, if you can go to the next slide. So we talked about two concepts. One is love notes and the other is co-creators. And in Kenmore, when we say love notes, it's not necessarily the kind of thing where you write a nice note on a card. It can be, but in Kenmore, the word love note means so much more than just a note on a card. And as you can see the definition there on the screen, it's things we do to show love for our community. And it can be an infinite number of things and ways to do that. And then the next concept we talked about is co-creator, those citizens who really make our places special and give us a sense of place. And what was fun about the event on Thursday night is the room was full of co-creators, and we only could highlight a few of them, and it was only the tip of the iceberg. And there's just so many people in the room and in our community that produce what we call these love notes. Next slide. So we hearkened back to the Peter Kageyama days. He first came to Kenmore in 2015, and we had him back in 2017. And that was really the beginning of this concept of For the Love of Kenmore and co-creators and love notes. Of course, it wasn't a new idea for many of our residents, but it was something that we started putting definitions to and supporting more and more. Next slide. And so at the event, I told the story of Rob Bliss from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and how he came to the permit counter at his local city there and asked for a permit. And because the city was willing to take a risk on him and say yes to the first permit, he went on and did many other wonderful and great things for the city, including dropping thousands of paper airplanes of different colors off of buildings. And then the lip dub, which I showed to the group on Thursday night, that's gotten millions of hits. And what if the city would have said no to Rob Bliss? Think of all the things they would have missed out on. So we like to say yes to pillow fights in the park. Next slide. We highlighted just three co-creators, Suzanne Greathouse of the Kenmore Heritage Society, Tracy Banashinsky of Snow King Watershed Council, and Maura Query, who is on our team and just on her own produces these really great love notes. And so the numbers and the stats they had were really inspiring. Next slide. And here's some examples of some of the activities. We had a kids corner that Lauren Homiak was in charge of. And so while it was all happening, these kids were producing their own love notes. And it's, I guess, what you maybe call a heart garland. That's what I'm calling it. But it's hanging out and right in front of right on the reception counter out there. So take a look. But these kids did just a great job producing that. And we'll hang that up in the hangar and other places too. And then you can see the Post-it notes. This was a fun activity that got a lot of people up and moving. And so that we left it's still right there behind you. We left all those things, and we'll have that go on tour in the community as well. And then I think we're getting close to the end. Yeah, this was the brainstorm activity. And what was really cool is each table was supposed to come up with an idea for a love note project. And then next slide, these are the presentations for their love notes. Next slide. And then we voted on them. So you can see those easels there. Each easel from each table was brought up to the front, and then people used heart stickers to vote for their favorite. And the winner was to get $500 courtesy of Snapdoodle Toys. And that $500 is to go to jumpstart their project idea. And what happened is everybody voted and 2 projects tied for first. And so we voted again and they tied for first again. And so we decided to figure out a way to get both of them the $500. So on the right there are the 2 young people that were the leaders of the 2 winning project ideas, Morgan and Austin. And Morgan's idea is to do composting in a community garden, and Austin's idea is to do a mural on the back of the Safeway that has a salmon habitat theme. So both very environmentally and climate action oriented ideas were the winning ideas. So lots of fun. Any other slide there? Oh yeah, we had Rita get up and talk about how to submit a love note and how to work with the city on those projects. So there you have it.
All right, thank you very much. Any comments? I had fun. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I had fun too. And I also saw a lot of people from our community having fun, and it was a real heartwarming experience to see people sharing their ideas and bringing forward such good things for our community. Something about For the Love of Kenmore really brings out the love and the fun. And I'm really thankful that our city opens the door to this and that we had such a successful event. It certainly was wonderful to be in person again. So thank you.
Next on the agenda is public comments. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We will hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you are online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial in matters, and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We currently have 5 individuals signed up for on-site public comment, and we'll take them in this order. John Culver, followed by Dakota Rash, Tracy Bonasinski, Elizabeth Mooney, and Chris Olson.
Good evening, Council. John Culver, Kenmore. It's been challenging watching ostensibly council deciding to cut its proposed funding from $1.5 million down to just $247K to start with this steps approach. But I'll admit, I'm turning a corner a little bit, because if you read between the lines here a little bit, this exercise seems pretty well designed to arrive at one conclusion, which also seems a little shy to say that part out loud. We're going to have to ask voters for a lot of money to fund the cap. How much money do we expect? When, roughly? Are we feeling like an advisory vote, non-binding, something toothier? These are questions worth asking, given that tonight's vote will be committing to this plan with real dollars in real time more fully. But before that, first, this steps plan prescribes we're going to seek out grant funding. How much might we reasonably expect to obtain? Does it justify delaying bigger actions by 8 to 24 months? Given the immediacy and the irreversibility of this crisis, which I trust you all understand well, these are also questions worth asking. Personally, I'm a little skeptical we're going to raise a whole lot. I looked at the Inflation Reduction Act in particular, and 75% of the money it allocates is tax rebates, not grants. And per the White House's Justice 40 initiative, 40% of those benefits are allocated to marginalized communities. Now that alone is inherently a good and great thing, but that also means, according to the White House's own climate and economic justice screening tool and the latest census data, it means that out of the gate, Kenmore does not qualify for 40% of those benefits. $369 billion is still a huge number, but it gets carved up pretty surgically before we're eligible to go after it for grant funds. And it should go without saying, I would love and prefer to be wrong. Please do quote me on that. But given the time and money are fleeting resources, we got to make a call. even in the face of some lingering questions on how well a given plan might work out. Well, good news, folks. There's a timeless, infallible, enduring solution, which we can always come back to as a tool set for seeking out the truth. Of course, we got to listen to the scientists, folks, the scientific method. Look at what we've done here. We've identified a problem. We've formed a hypothesis. We're about to enact an experiment to test it. But first, we got to make a testable prediction. With that in mind, and in the spirit of community engagement, transparency, and hopefully a little fun, I've put together these fillable worksheets, which I'll be distributing around the room to capture our predictions on these key 4 questions I've laid out. How much funding do we estimate to obtain from the grants? How much funding do we estimate to ask from voters? When do we expect to vote on the issue? And do we think that will be advisory or binding? I'm calling on each council member and our beloved city manager, Rob Carr-Lindsay, to offer their own predictions and best estimates on these during your designated report time. If y'all are all in on supporting this plan, let's do some collective exploration into what good and expected outcomes could look like. There are plenty more questions to be answered.
Thank you. Your
but given
time is up.
again, time means moving forward with real resources, as has been said many times. It's a good place to start.
Hello, thank you all for the time tonight. My name is Dakota Rash and I'm a resident of Lake Forest Park. There's a wide variety of actions happening in the world with related to climate change. There are some people who in their short-sighted self-interests, I think at this point are intentionally making it worse. There are actions that I think grant hope, like the cities of Ann Arbor and Ithaca adopting net zero timelines by 2030, and Brazil pledging that it's going to stop harming the lungs of the world soon. I think that's very hopeful. And then there's actions in the middle, closer to the good end, like the federal government of our nation committing to net zero by 2050, which I think science backs is not a quick enough timeline because it risks passing several tipping points that would make this crisis spiral out of control. With what I think might happen tonight with funding the cap, it feels like the middle to me. I am glad we're at this point that we are talking about having a climate action plan. I am not excited about several factors about how we're going to fund it and how we're moving forward. I think we have an egg with us. And what we needed was a big honkin' rooster yesterday. And so I encourage each of you to, and I know you do this, and I guess I'll just be another voice asking for it even more tonight, is just the continued analysis of what we think is the established system. What are hard limitations and what are norms that need to be moved and broken? Like not having a B&O tax in this city, which clearly with all the empty buildings has not created a bastion of business, or having reserved funding, which doesn't really make sense in the face of spending it on something that would prevent disaster. Disasters break norms forcefully and often leave destruction in their wake. Take the recent COVID-19 pandemic. It changed things that we thought were inchangeable, and sometimes for the better, but climate change isn't going to do that. One example is me. Court is now virtual. I was in 4 hearings today. I wasn't in person. And I can, you can bet your britches that no judge was ever going to implement that. But things change, norms change, and we know how they need to change now. So I would encourage you all to look very hard at what you consider to be the norms and the hard limitations in things like budgets and funding mechanisms, and change them while we still have time to control that change, as opposed to trying to catch up to an ever-escalating crisis. Thank you.
Tracy Bonashinsky, Kenmore. I am grateful for the 2 important items on your agenda for discussion and direction tonight. You are poised to take important steps in terms of both climate and environment work generally with the hiring of a CAT manager and protecting Swamp Creek specifically with the Swamp Creek carve out in the TOD. To those of you who have been visionary in those areas, thank you so much. Our future is secure and prosperous only when we address the twin existential crises of our time: climate collapse and how we live with the ecosystems that support us, which is all of them. I am hopeful that your votes tonight will take us in the better direction I know we can go, and very deeply hopeful that it will be the swiftest of stops in ongoing work rather than the last word or even any amount of resting on our laurels. We can't afford not to keep moving and moving much faster than our target of net zero by 2050. We are already living with the consequences of delayed action as carbon levels in the atmosphere are at record highs and we continue to degrade and destroy important ecosystems. In 2021 in the Pacific Northwest, you might remember that hundreds of people and more than 1 billion marine mammals died in an extreme heat wave. In Europe, unprecedented flooding killed more than 170 people and swept away houses. In China, record-breaking rain poured into a subway line and killed 14 people, leaving others trapped until they could be rescued. In the Gulf of Mexico, overheated waters supercharged Hurricane Ida, which left more than 1 million people in Louisiana without power and caused at least 52 deaths in the northeastern US. I could go on with many even more recent examples. It is in this context that climate goals to get to net zero by 2050 don't go far enough. These goals center around trying to limit global warming to an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius, but we're already seeing catastrophic impacts as the Earth's temperature has risen a little over 1 degree. Current rates of emissions are so high that it's likely we'll blow past the 1.5 degree threshold within a decade, far earlier than 2050, and then face the challenge of trying to bring the temperature back down to only 1.5 degree rise later in the century. Even if the goal of a 1.5 degree limit, even if the goal is a 1.5 degree limit, we'll have to move faster to reach it. And with the future of pretty much everything at stake, we should rethink whether the goal is ambitious enough. To that point, I would like to talk about CAP funding. Another of my deep hopes is that we will, much sooner rather than later, make a full funding plan that involves stable, reliable, certain sources of income. I love grants. I work for an environmental nonprofit whose projects are almost entirely funded by grants, which means my personal livelihood is dependent on them. We can indeed do brilliant things with grant money, and we absolutely should, but we should not leave critical climate work to funding from agencies that are often directed by the political whims of the administration in power, and that even if leadership is favorable, are highly competitive. At my job, if we don't get grant funding for a project, we don't do it. We can't afford to not do this climate work. Let the grant money be the frosting on a cake we know we have the money to bake. Thank you all so much.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Mooney, resident of Kenmore since '95, and I am also wearing this hat to fund the CAP. I want to support John Culver, Dakota Rash's, and Tracy Bonazinski's points, and really happy about that Swamp Creek carve out. Make it bigger. Bigger is better right now for everything they're talking about and you're dealing with. We aren't going to have salmon or evergreen trees if we don't at that stage. But on a happy note, hey, thank you so much for the love of Kenmore. We are participating. PERC is, as president of PERC, really excited to be working with Arts of Kenmore and Austin. Just super excited. So it'll be engagement. It'll be a Safeway. I want to shout out for the manager of Safeway because he got the info faster. Bob Schroeder, say hi to him when you go over there. So that's number one. Yay for the mural. Thanks. Great presentation, Rob. Number two, the grant that Dr. Joan Hardy came in and chatted with you a couple months ago about she would be generously offering to write a grant for King County Waterworks. And so that is now coming together, and thanks to staff Richard Sawyer and Garrett Oppenheimer. He and we at PERC are going to meet this week just to see if thank you again, Tracy Bonazinski and city for promoting the purchase of the property on Chetchathel, the stream, if everybody doesn't know, that's on 61st, whose mouth ends in Logboom Park, has potential for kokanee. We are going to talk to Garrett tomorrow about the potential for this year and or next year of writing a grant there for native plants and invasive work. So thank you. And looking back at when the Lockwood kids adopted that stream and had salmon in the classroom and planted them, those coho lived. So this is really exciting. Fourth, well, Cadman tested. Cadman, the asphalt company, is now called Heidelberg. If you didn't know, Jana told me that. She's she did not meet with us. We offered to meet with them to have engagement of like Kate Donaldson, who tastes the asphalt on her sheets, and they opted out, which I think was too bad. But I would like to just propose that the citizens in our community know that Cadman, thanks to you all and the citizens working hard at pressure, they did test on the 26th. And it would be great to get that information to the citizens about where they can still complain for nuisance problems. Like, is it the hangar? Is it Log Boom Park, Burt Gilman Trail? And we'd be happy to help get that message out because we won't know until the.
Thank you. Your time is up. Chris Olson.
Good evening, Council. I'm Chris Olson. I live on 62nd Avenue in Kenmore. I did not plan on bringing Theo here tonight, but I've scheduled some things with the wife. And, made more sense for me to take him with me today. So apologies for any interruptions in advance. I would like to speak tonight in support of trying to get additional help on CAP. I understand that ramping it up can be a risk to the city by hiring additional staff members and perhaps getting just some help from a consulting firm for a year to apply for grants might be a path that the city could look into. Furthermore, I think it's very urgent. One would like a future for myself, nonetheless my child here. And I also think that climate is interrelated with the built environment and other improvements that we need to be making to Kenmore. Many people who were opposed to missing middle were opposed due to what they viewed as infrastructure inadequacies, including things like a lack of sidewalks, which I've heard from many parents as well, who don't feel their children are safe walking to school. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. One thing that I would kind of like to add to that is trying to limit widening out roadways in favor of promoting alternative options. I bike with him on the back, and I'd like to have safe routes for that, especially at intersections. Intersection improvements are very, very important. 90% of bicycle vehicle crashes occur at intersections. 10% occur along the traveled way. Ironically, if you protect the travel way though, more people bike. So you kind of have to do both, even though really the injuries occur at intersections generally. I don't really blame people though for not feeling comfortable biking next to cars. I'm kind of unique in that perspective, and I don't feel comfortable when he's on the back of the bike doing that. Furthermore, I do think that phasing missing middle into certain areas, especially by transit routes, is something that at a minimum the city should look into doing in areas that are not going to be TOD. Building on infill land rather than green fields is going to be better for the environment. And if we need to meet a housing crisis and an environmental crisis, that's one of the easiest things we can do, is just allow people to increase density on already impacted and impervious land. And if possible, reclaiming land that is in more environmentally sensitive areas like, say, Swamp Creek or areas around that. Yeah, anyways, I hope you all have a good evening. I'm surprised he didn't get upset. He looks like he's about to lose.
Mayor, I have no additional on-site public comments signed up. Can we move on to virtual?
Yes.
Great. If you are virtual and would like to give public comment at this time, please use the raise hand function. We currently have 5 individuals signed up. So we'll go starting with Danah Van Buchen, followed by Stacy Valenzuela, Sarah Fletcher, James Olson, and Julian Lowe. Danah, go ahead.
All right. Can you just confirm that you can hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, beautiful. I'm Danah Van Buchen. I'm in Kenmore. And I just thank you in advance for your time. I would like to raise concern about the abandoned property across from the entrance to Wallace Swamp Creek Park on 73rd. Our family lives just north of the property, and there has been a constant stream of teens coming and going from the property in the past couple of years, really. A couple of nights ago, there was a huge party there that lasted until police showed up around midnight, and my husband and I watched from our window as over 50 teens left on foot and in cars. Many were drunk or very high. One person ran into the Little Free Library in front of our house on 73rd with their car and knocked it over, and it's completely been destroyed. Ambulances and other EMS teams have recently been at the property treating people for what I am assuming to be drug overdoses. And there are unsupervised bonfires being held there, evidence of drug use, alcohol bottles all over the property, trash, fast food wrappers all over the property. And the damage to the property, which is located on an environmentally sensitive area right across from Wallace Swamp Creek Park, seemed counterproductive to all of the work being done to restore and protect the park. At first, the traffic on the property just felt like a nuisance, but it's now becoming a safety concern for the teams frequently in the buildings and the surrounding community members. And it's also hazardous to the environment. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice on how we can change the state of things. It looks like the property is owned by a developer and has been since 2014, but has sat vacant since then. And at the very least, I think it would really help to keep people safe to demo the buildings on site so that they aren't a draw for teens looking for a place for unsupervised drug or alcohol use. I know I would feel very uncomfortable having my own teen there, and I assume many other parents might feel the same. So can you please advise? I, along with many other concerned neighbors, would like to know what we can do to change the state of things. And then I just want to add, after hearing about the For the Love of Kenmore project, I would like to offer up that it might be a great site for a future community garden, as it's right across from Wallace Swamp Creek, and maybe the parking lot could serve both properties. I would love to see something more come out of this space than what it is currently being used for. So thank you for listening again.
Stacy, go ahead.
Good evening, Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. We, the residents, continue to fight for the climate action plan and ask our city apply the environmental lens and find the funding. Are the new hires tonight introduced for climate action? Isn't that what we were supposed to be hiring for? Our residents need the actions of the city, developers, and other entities to reflect our needs. Our residents need relief from taxing. Our residents need relief from increasing or doubling fees. Where are the exemptions for seniors and low incomes? We are suffering from high inflation and rent increases. Instead, please cut back the funding for medical for all family members of city employees. Charge them partial. Cut back employee fund budget and the farmers market, both of $170,000, over $2,500 per employee. Sponsorships should be covering the costs of the farmers market. Do loss prevention of equipment and supplies. Seems the majority of our residents and the environmental stewards who week after week express their concerns and share their knowledge for improvements in our city are being overlooked. We need change. We are asking you to stand for our residents' priorities, support ordinances for our residents and environmental concerns. We need affordable housing also, even developers stating, unless you enforce at a minimum the 25% of units in the TOD are affordable at 50% or 30% AMI and below per ordinance 220545, the city will not make a dent in the needs for our residents. But we also need to keep heights considered. We challenge you to adopt tighter protections for our open spaces, our natural habitat, our TOD, our waterways. We need action. You can make a difference by cutting back on the budget. Be the example for the others to follow by funding the CAP plan, adopting the Planning Commission's recommended missing middle and TOD restrictions. The Affordable Housing Ordinance. Support Tracy Braniszki's minority report by saying no to the high density near the boundaries, protecting our rookery. Support recovery of the Swamp Creek. Trim the budget in the city level. Kenmore incorporated in 1998 to avoid being controlled by the Growth Management Board and other entities. The majority of our residents want the same still today. Together, we could do more to protect our residents, homes, the wildlife, and the environmental treasures of Kenmore. Please reject the ordinances tonight. Thank you.
Sarah Fletcher.
Hello, my name is Sarah Fletcher, and I am a resident of Lake Forest Park. I'm here tonight in support of Dakota Rash and others speaking about the Climate Action Plan. A stitch in time saves 9. If you don't address a tear or rip when it's small, you run the very real risk of it soon becoming bigger, requiring much more effort and thread to fix. Climate change is not a small rip or tear, but it does pose the very real risk of becoming an immense problem, spiraled out of our ability to control or address. To illustrate, between 1980 and 2021, the US suffered 7 or 8 natural disasters per year on average. In 2022, there were over 20. Losses from those disasters, including wildfires across the West Coast, severe storms in the Midwest, flooding in Kentucky and Missouri, and hurricanes in the Southeast have exceeded $1 billion. Whether or not years like 2022 are viewed as an outlier depends on us. Global scientific consensus tells us that we have to put everything we have into addressing the climate crisis. We need massive, precedent-busting action that we are only now just starting to see in some pockets of the world. I don't want my summers to be miserable. They used to be the secret gem of our state. I don't want them to be known for smoke and fire. I would encourage the city of Kenmore to push the boundaries it is establishing with its current climate action plan. It's great that we have one, yes, and it is not yet a response to the scale of the crisis. We're not trying to build fossil fuel infrastructure. Yes, and 2050 isn't a carbon neutral goal that is backed by the science telling us what we need to do to ensure a livable future on this planet. I support the steps you all are taking, and for all our sakes, I sincerely hope that you will do so much more. Thank you.
James Olson, go ahead.
There. Okay, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yes, I'm James Olson. I'm a resident of Kenmore. I live on 62nd Avenue Northeast. First, I'd like to point out that I support lives over drives, something I'll continue to say probably every time I go in this call just to get the point across. I also want to note that my taxes increased significantly this last year. Ironically, that's something I support because it increases the resilience of my community. And I would like to point out I also support the cap. I actually recommend that we perhaps make a set of proposals of tax increases, sort of say different levels, and actually run it by the public to actually vote on and kind of find out what their support is at what levels. Many of us, including myself, would be happy with a tax increase, provided it means our kids are safer and healthier. There's evidence of this actually working out in Bothell when they're talking about protecting the kids. People were actually quite happy in that case to actually increase their taxes. Finally, I want to add, and I'll give an example. For example, if my kids are not going to be hit by cars because they're going to be going slower, if you make safety improvements to the roads, I would happily pay more taxes for that. Finally, I wanted to point out that I really love the Love Notes event this weekend. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot. Again, thanks, James Olson.
Julian Lowe, followed by Victoria Grayland.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. Julian Lowe, Local Government Affairs Manager with Puget Sound Energy, Seattle, Washington. I'm here to speak about Agenda Item 8A, cap funding. As I've stated in the past, Puget Sound Energy is striving to be a beyond net zero company. To that end, we look forward to working with businesses, residents, and all our customers to have carbon neutral power by 2030 and carbon free power by 2045. PSE has supported landmark legislation for our environment. This includes the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, Climate Commitment Act, and the Clean Energy Transformation Act. We look forward to our continued partnership with Kenmore on the Climate Action Plan. We do really appreciate the inclusion of elements like green power and the Clean Building Accelerator. We look forward to partnering with the city on reducing emissions from the built environment through means like renewable natural gas and our carbon balance offset program. We recognize some of the comments that have been made by city staff and residents regarding the funding mechanisms involving CAP funding that the City Council is considering tonight. We look forward and would welcome the opportunity to partner with the city on raising awareness about our bill payment assistance programs, or possibly partnering like we do with other jurisdictions on a utility tax relief program. And considering some of the comments made tonight, we would look forward to partnering on possible opportunities on grant funding at the federal level, including the Inflation Reduction Act. Thank you again so much for your time this evening, and look forward to partnering on building a cleaner energy future with the City of Kenmore and all its residents and businesses. Thank you.
Victoria Grayland.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, I want to congratulate Morgan and Austin on their projects. Congratulations. I look forward to seeing them both. And it's always good to see young people get involved with the environment. I want to say that I agree with my fellow citizens. I live in Kenmore. I especially agree with Dakota Rash. His plan a few weeks ago was to have a citizens board to enforce the climate action plan. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think you should listen to Julian Lowe, the lobbyist for Puget Sound Energy. When I saw you were going to raise taxes on natural gas, I thought, oh, great. That's how they're going to encourage more people to get heat pumps. Other towns have formed a coalition to help people finance their heat pump installation. But this is more the stick than the carrot. Thank you, Kenmore. That's all I have to say tonight.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised for virtual public comment, but we do have one additional on-site public comment.
Okay.
Nancy Hansen. Ms. Hansen, will you lower the microphone?
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Yeah. Nancy Hansen from Kenmore. And this is just last minute after hearing everybody else. I had to say something. So I do support the first four speakers and the other people on who I don't know who spoke for the climate action plan funding. And my thing has been wetlands, and I know that we need someone here to be supporting all of the things that maybe are a little hard to understand about environmental issues, but we need to be doing more than we are. And I guess the best thing that I have had going here since I've moved to Kenmore, probably 7 years ago now, is the Swamp Creek restoration. And also Rob Carlinzi's announcement that the volunteers get to do more work there and with cleaning up the blackberries that go to Tlaquettes Park in that area. And I'm just happy to see no more corporations and machinery in that area, because we need to save it instead of bulldozing it down like been done in the park already. It's a mess. And let's see, I guess something else I was going to say. The funding issue. I think, I would totally support any amount that we have to pay in taxes. It's so little, I can't believe it, for what we're getting out of it. And the other ways of funding would be great if they're possible, but I think we need to be adding that to taxes. I don't think Kenmore has been taxed a lot in the past it doesn't here in comparison with other cities. I'm not sure total what it is. It looks like it's higher as far, somebody said it was higher than Medina or whatever, but I don't think so. I think we're, I think it's quite fair. And I guess the person who's being hired is going to be fully needed and the best thing that's ever happened to Kenmore as far as I'm seeing since I've moved here. Just in considering the climate things we have coming ahead. So thank you very much. It's kind of a mess, but thank you. Bye.
Mayor, I have no additional speakers signed up for public comment.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. Next on the agenda, we have the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The consent agenda stands approved. Moving on to the business agenda. First item, climate action plan implementation and housing and human services budget and funding presented by City Manager Rob Carl-Lindsay, Deputy City Manager Stephanie Lukash, and Environmental Services Manager Richard Sawyer for approval. And to be clear, we have 4 separate things we're approving as part of this agenda item.
Thank you, Your Honor, and members of the City Council. Yeah, tonight's an important night. You're talking about some long-lasting policy issues that are going to affect how we treat the environment and the climate, and also making things more equitable in our community. So you have you've discussed this 3 separate times, once on October 17th, again on November 7th, and then this topic for this climate action plan and housing human services, you talked about it again on January 23rd. And now, as the mayor said, we're bringing it forward to you, this funding package for final approval tonight. You'll notice that in this slide deck that we're going to be going through, there's a lot of slides you've already seen and the public's already seen. And we think it's worth repeating because in case there are members of the public that did not participate in the last 3 meetings, it's important for them to see these slides tonight to understand the why behind what we're doing and how we're proposing it. So if you can bear with us in kind of seeing a repeat of some of these slides, but I think it's important in case people are late to the party. So I just want to reiterate that your top 2 goals are the climate action plan, including environmental sustainability and habitat restoration, and then also affordable housing. And very closely connected with affordable housing is human services. So both of these top two priorities address urgent crises that demand immediate attention, and they both need new funding above and beyond what we currently have in our budget.
And again, as Rob stated, some of these will be repeats. However, I think these next few quotes really encapsulate the importance and urgency of what we're trying to accomplish here. So again, this quote from the United Nations states that climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we are the defining moment. From shifting weather patterns that threaten food production to rising sea levels that increase the risk of catastrophic flooding, the impacts of climate change are global in scope and unprecedented in scale. Without drastic action today, adapting to these impacts in the future will be more difficult and costly. And the UN Convention on Biological Diversity speaks to biodiversity loss. And biodiversity loss, which is the loss of species, is happening right now around the world and around the world is unprecedented in human history and in the last 10 million years. Today's global rate of species extinction is at least tens to hundreds of times higher than the average over the past 10 million years. And last, the World Resources Institute on the Climate Social Impact states that climate change poses the greatest threat to those least responsible for it, including low-income and disadvantaged populations, women, racial minorities, marginalized ethnic groups, and the elderly.
And we also wanted to, again, repeat some of the quotes that we shared with you before because of the importance of tonight and the work moving forward. So on housing and human services, we had told you before, and we stand by this quote from Nelson Mandela that says, "Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity, it is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life." And FDR had said also, "The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little." And then finally, a quote from our governor when he was talking about affordable housing, and he says, "Over the long term, we need more housing that average workers can afford. And those solutions require every community to do their part." And we think that also includes us in Kenmore. So what we're saying is there are these twin crises that both deserve action now, and the time is of the essence. And Kenmore is not immune to either of the crises of the CAP or climate action and housing and human services. And we've already adopted the climate action plan. The council adopted that last year. And so we just need the funding to move forward for that really critical work that is your top priority. And we have a role to play on many levels, both locally, but also regionally, in helping people find and stay housed and have access to meet their basic human needs and connect them to services. And we know in our city that this housing and human services body of work is growing. And every day, there are probably 3 times a day, I think, I can't wait for help because there's so much work that we're doing in the housing and human services realm. So the time is now to act and to give both of these causes the resources that they deserve. And it may seem like a lot, these quotes, they're aspirational and they're important, and we think that they set a tone. But what we also want you to know that we're not trying to scare people. We're not about fear and guilt when we talk about this really important work and implementing your top 2 priorities. But we hope that the starting place that we all can take is a place of hope and empowerment and action and love.
Our approach to implementing the climate action plan starting this year, which is necessary to achieve the city's greenhouse gas reduction goal of 50% by 2030, is to dedicate staff to manage implementation of the climate action plan, align our efforts with our regional partners, and step up in stages with clear and measurable goals. And what that includes is to hire a climate action plan manager immediately so that they can begin implementing key components of the climate action plan now, assess our existing resources, such as grants and partnerships that can be leveraged to implement the climate action plan, apply for grants and establish partnerships, and then based on that, begin determining what kind of staffing and resource gaps remain. And then by this fall, we will come back to council with a proposal for additional staffing, resources, and funding to continue stepping up our implementation of the CAP.
And similarly, we'll take up an approach like this with our housing and human services work. And listed here, you'll see a number of the areas we're already working in the housing and human services realm, whether it's a new racer agency, the work to building a 24/7 crisis center to North King County Community Court, Regional Coalition for Housing, our longstanding partnership and work there. And then the North King County Coalition on Homelessness, King County Regional Homelessness Authority, the North Urban Human Services Alliance, and the 2 affordable housing projects in downtown Kenmore that we're working hard on at your direction. So it's helping, this person would help staff all of those efforts and be involved in all of those efforts. And then tonight we heard actually in public comment, a note from PSC about a utility rebate program. And that's exactly what this person would do, is research and connect people to those kinds of programs. I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Similarly to the work that Richard talked about for CAP, research and apply for grants. We know we'll need outside funding for this work and want to pursue all those opportunities. And the idea would be that this Housing and Human Services Manager would hold office hours and would work directly with members of our community in need who already come into City Hall and ask for help from our reception. And we're just not equipped right now to fully respond to and answer the kinds of questions they have. So having someone with expertise and knowledge and who's developing and really nurturing those partnerships with our partners will be really important. And then a needs assessment to understand fully what the needs are of our community. And then based on what that needs assessment says, to determine what staffing and resource gaps we have and bring forward also this fall a proposal for additional resources and funding for a full Housing and Human Services program.
The main categories of the proposed expenditures are in front of you tonight on this slide. We went over these on January 23rd. On the administrative support costs, or also known as overhead, we're including an additional position in finance. We're calling it Administrative Services Manager to help with not only the work that's growing in support of these two funding packages or items in the funding package, but also just to support other administrative costs that have been growing as a result as well. So here's a slide that shows the proposed uses or expenditures and also the funding sources. One change from last time is because of the transportation vehicle license fee coming in a little bit later than the year than we had expected. We had to adjust that number a little bit, which requires about 40,000 more from the general fund here in this first year. But then once we get into a full year in 2024, we won't need the general fund contribution. So the proposed funding sources are a solid waste utility tax, 10%, natural gas utility tax increase from 4% to 6%, an increase in the vehicle license fee from $20 to $40. And what that would do is it would reduce the general fund's subsidy to the street fund and thereby free up those general fund dollars for this funding package. We looked at what other cities charge in these three areas, and you can see where Kenmore compares. One number we updated from last time is Lake Forest Park vehicle fees. We had it at 40, but effective this May, theirs is going to $50. Cities can't bring it to $50 until they've been at 40 for 2 years. And then we looked at what it would cost a typical household, and the numbers we came up with are $11.53. I think this is conservative because it was using a house that has pretty much all the gas appliances that you could have. Gas fireplace, stove, furnace. What am I missing? Something. Anyway, stove, fireplace, water heater. Thank you. That's it. Water heater. So that house that we used happens to be my house, has all those gas utilities. And so we think that's a good conservative number. The solid waste number assumes all that the residence has all 3 bins, normal size bins. So the proposed effective date that you'll see in the ordinances and the resolution, both the natural gas and the garbage utility tax, the proposed effective date is May 1st. We've checked with the agencies and they do need a couple months notice. And so this works for them. And then by state law, the vehicle fee increase can't go into effect until 6 months after adoption.
We also want to talk about equity considerations as we implement our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility work. This is really important for us. And when we think about those in need in our community, and I know that it was brought up before, and it's a really important point that for some in our community, this will be a hardship. And so we're committed with the Housing and Human Services Manager to work on connecting our residents with services and assistance and rebate programs that exist. And we know that those kinds of programs right now are underutilized in Kenmore. And so that's a concern to us. We want to address that and remedy that. Some of the examples are listed here, including some of the North Shore Utility District discount program, PSE, and also property tax and surface water fee exemptions. And we know that there are people not taking advantage of those. So that would be part of what could happen in office hours and in regular connection with our manager. And then also, as we think about these new funding sources, having our Housing and Human Services Manager research whether to have a city-funded utility rebate program, and also understand what resources it would take internally to implement and administer that. So we think that's a really important thing to do. We know that's important, and we do want to acknowledge that anytime you're raising any new taxes or fees, it can be a hardship, and we want to do our part to remedy that and address that for those in need.
And anytime that council's faced with such critical decisions like this, we just wanted to make sure that we're transparent and we communicate with the community on this topic. So the next couple slides, we just wanted to remind council that, as Rob's mentioned previously, we've brought this forward twice last year during the budget period in October 17th and November 7th council meetings. And again, in January 23rd, where council unanimously voted to bring this funding package tonight forward. And then on the next slide, we just wanted to point out a lot of the communication efforts that the city has made on this topic. You'll see multiple emails to our distribution lists. We've put this in the city's e-newsletters. We've been sending this out on our social media multiple times, reaching thousands of followers. We've created the webpage for this topic and kept that up to date. And we have sent news releases out, again, to thousands of email recipients and several news agencies.
Okay. So as the mayor mentioned, there's 4 actions for you to consider this evening. The first one is to authorize the additional expenditures, and you'll see that in attachment 1 to the agenda bill. That includes the 3 new positions and their salary ranges. And then the second item would be to adopt ordinance number 23-0570, increasing the utility tax levy on natural gas in the city of Kenmore from 4% to 6%. And then the third item would be to adopt ordinance number 23-0571, creating a utility tax on solid waste collection at a rate of 10%. And then lastly, adopting resolution 23-393, authorizing an increase in the annual vehicle fee in the city of Kenmore from $20 to $40. And I would just like to say that I really appreciate the council's direction and feedback and the discussion that's been going on since October. I did present a plan back in October, but I think the plan you've come up with and with your guidance and the one we've been working on as a result, I think it's a much actually more efficient and faster way to funding the cap and assuring that we get this right. So I'm very pleased with where we're at. I'm confident that it is, like I said, the most efficient and effective way to getting the cap fully funded. And this step is a really important step. So any questions or discussion?
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, can we go back to that last slide, please? Yeah, so I'm a little confused. We're adopting ordinance number 23-0570 on the privilege of carrying on the business of selling, furnishing, or transmitting natural gas in the city of Kenmore. We're raising a 2% tax on the companies for the privilege of delivering gas?
Are you hung up on the word privilege?
No, I'm just hung on who are we taxing?
In this case, it's Puget Sound Energy. But this is kind of the legal language you need
Okay.
to have in the ordinance.
So then we are taxing Republic Solid Waste for the utility tax on waste collection.
Correct. See, providers can change, come and go, so the ordinance needs to not mention the specific provider.
So is this going to be a direct charge to the residents of Kenmore?
So it'll be charged to the utility companies, but they will pass it on directly to our residents and businesses.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Well, I'm excited about this. This has been a while coming, but I know we've been pedaling as fast as is feasible. I just encourage us to, I think you've already posted for the climate action plan manager. So hopefully that will be hired, but with that person and in addition to that person, I hope we can just leverage every resource that's already out there. I mean, there's tons of policies we are not the only city doing this. We are not the only small city doing this. All of our neighbors, large and small, are doing climate action work. It's okay to steal stuff. I look at Bellevue's, the East, what is it called? Energy Smart East Side. Terrific program promoting heat pumps. Has in addition to for sort of average earners, there's incentives, and then there's 100% cost offset for households with low income. I look at EV incentives that are out there, both at the federal level and at the state level. These are things we can just post and start promoting. Policy changes are largely free in terms of the staff role in making them. It's staff time. So there are many things we can do even in the absence of or before we get additional funding. So I look forward to seeing that work come forward. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I respond to that? Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Shrubnik. I couldn't agree more. And we have a lot of items already built into our work plan, and including in development services. So, yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Well, I'm thankful that we have this before us today. I'm especially thankful that we're hiring two managers, two leaders for these incredibly important roles for the city of Kenmore, climate action and health and human services. I know in both areas, and I think in particular, health and human services were particularly stretched thin at this moment. And we're behind the gun on getting really rolling on our climate action plan. I just want to reiterate a couple of things. One, I genuinely hope that the direction that this city takes is visionary. I hope that as we hire someone, we have someone who is shooting for the moon and creative and able to help carry us where we need to go as a city to become a leader in green jobs, invasive species removal, watershed protection and restoration, all the things that we can be doing here. I hope we find someone that has that vision and skill and ability to help us lead this plan. That said, I certainly hope they come back. And I don't care if it's before September, if they come back sooner with a plan to get our funding up to that $1.5 million that we had in our original, up to $2 million a year or more. as soon as possible, because if we have to go to the voters for this, I would love to get this on the ballot in November of 2023, not later. And I know that's awfully tight for a September timeline, but I want us to have the open heart and vision to say, maybe it's possible. I had some concerns that we might not have enough specificity to go to the voters for the full funding that we were asking for. But the sooner we get there, the better. It's incredibly important. That 1.5 million a year, sooner than later, at least. And we do need to fund FTEs for this work and make that commitment. Every investment in FTEs in climate action is an investment in our community, an investment in our economy and our future. So just want to say, I am really thankful that we have this here. I'm expecting vision coming back as far as how we can get the funding to do more soon, because we have to. We've heard from our community. I know we're going to get the yes votes. And I know that we have great projects coming up. And so anyway, I just want to say thank you for bringing this here. I'm glad we're where we are. I understand where our community wants more, and I fully support more as soon as possible. Thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. You know, this has been a beautiful piece of work, a great piece of work done by our partners, our city and our council, and in conjunction with our community. I wish it could have started sooner, but we have to start from somewhere. And tonight's an exciting night. To be able to move forward with a stable, climate and population growth, and looking at biodiversity and undoing generational inequities, we are starting on a good trend. And while the budget is for this category is less than what I would like to see, I would like to see us move forward with bringing this to the voters by November, and give the autonomy to the new directors to be able to hire their staff to help them meet the needs of these growing areas of a deep amount of work, because it's a lot of work. And I'm just really happy we're finally getting to the stage, and also that we'll be able to bring these wonderful environmental improvements and housing improvements and connectivities to our community of Kenmore, to serve our fellow neighbors. So I'm excited. I wholeheartedly support Deputy Mayor O'Kane's position. And I would bear in mind, I would rather like to see a motion in that way tonight, but I know that there's still more discussion to be had.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Baker.
Yes. It was said during your presentation that you expect a 50% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. That means you expect a 7% reduction every year. I would really like to know how you can present that what you're doing is being successful in reaching that goal. I am very much in favor of greenhouse gas reduction. I think it's an extremely important issue, but I don't want to throw $2 million a year forever down a drain. I wanted to actually accomplish something. But you can't give me any indication of any metric that you will use to show the taxpayers of this community that it's working. I mean, my understanding is the biggest contributor, that roadway out there, 60,000 cars a day with CO2 emissions. We can't count that. Well, that certainly adds up to greenhouse gases in our community. So I would like to be able to go to the public, the residents of Kenmore, and say, this is how much we've reduced greenhouse gases in our community this year. Can you do that?
That's a great question, and yes, we will. Part of the cap is conducting those measurements and reporting that to council on whatever frequency that you would like. So we conducted a baseline greenhouse gas emissions in 2019, and they do, it can be challenging, like you said. For instance, with 522, we have to do some estimating, but we can get traffic counts. We can calculate average emissions based on types of vehicles that are out there on average and get a greenhouse number for that. We can work with our utility providers and get estimates for buildings and energy. So it's actually buildings and energy that's the majority of our greenhouse gas emissions, not transportation on 522. But yes, we will be consistently measuring those emissions and reporting back to council as we implement this.
So then you can show me a 3% reduction by December.
We'll measure what the actual reductions are and present those to you, yes.
The other thing is, I'm very concerned with the seniors in the community. You have indicated that you will set up a human services program in Kenmore and help the low-income residents get the reductions in different areas that they're entitled to. And I believe that, but I would really like to see that start before you start raising taxes. $138 increase in a year has been shown to cause at least 5 families to lose their housing because of the current condition of economy. You've got people with stock holdings, retirement holdings, who've dropped precipitously in the last year. You've got people that still aren't working and benefits are running out. We lowered gas and water 2% to help our seniors on fixed incomes have something that they needed. They all need gas. They need something to heat their house. We also did it on water, but evidently there's nothing we can do about water because that was done earlier. But I really have a hard time going to the voters, the seniors in our community, without something tangible that I can say, yes, this works, or no, we're changing our plans. Also, the mandatory garbage collection. There are lots of seniors in our community that they're neighbors and they share services. That's you showed on your own bill, that's $138 a year. That's the increase. The average home bill for garbage collection is close to $140. So you add that with $138 increase, I mean, you're talking a serious increase there. I cannot see forcing everybody in this city to have garbage collection. It's all going to be on the homeowner, because you're not going to do that with condos. You're not going to do that with apartment buildings. It's strictly single family homes. I just don't think at this time is fair. Now, if you can please tell me I'm wrong, I would be happy to listen.
Councilor Shrevenick.
I think to address maybe some of that, can you just sort of, well, 2 things. Remind us the time frame for when the taxes go into effect versus the, rebates that we're looking for. I think we talked about that before. So that's one. And I just also want to make a comment that I forgot to make the first time, which was for Kenmore, at least 99, I think, % of the greenhouse gas emissions are not from municipal operations, they're from the community. So the kinds of things that I was talking about before, which, like heat pumps, changing from, fossil fuel cars to EVs, the kinds of things that residents can do are really what's going to drive the reductions in greenhouse gas. So, getting the information out there on how people can do that and the rebates that are available is be really important. So, yeah. So the timeframes might be helpful for addressing the concerns.
Michelle, could you show the slide presentation? Yeah, so this was the slide that Stephanie went over. These programs are in place now, but they're underutilized. And so we have been, and we will continue to work on getting the word out to our residents. And with the Housing and Human Services Manager, we can ramp up the outreach and educational efforts even more. The effective date of the proposed new taxes is May 1st for gas, May 1st for garbage, and late August, early September for the vehicle fee. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, I want to thank staff for all their work bringing this here. I know it's been a lot of back and forth. I do need to express my just heartburn that I have around the solid waste tax personally. I also want to say I fully recognize that cities' hands are tied. We're limited quite a bit by the state on where we can and can't go for funding. We're dealing with the structural issues related to the 1% with the property tax, which systemically lowers our budgets every year on a real basis compared to inflation. Our options for other funding are not great. We've used most of the other ones in the past, and now we're getting down to some of them that I'm a little less happy with. A lot of the options given to cities are straight up very regressive. One of my first no votes on the council was on I think it was on a water sewer utility fee that we passed back in like 2014. Because I'm worried about, especially when we start taxing things that people need to live. That said, I don't have an issue with the natural gas tax, especially as it's tied to what we're trying to address here with climate. Same with the vehicle fee. But I do have a little bit of heartburn when it comes to the solid waste fee personally. Councilmember File.
Thank you. I see that, in listening to one of our other council members' concerns regarding impact to seniors, and comparing solid waste to only impacting homeowners, we know that that's not exactly the case. Whether you're in a townhouse development, a condo development, or an apartment development, the bill is divided accordingly, and it does hit the same. That aside, when we're looking at solid waste and the work being done to encourage recycling and reduction, let alone the new bill language that's coming out to cities, new policy language coming out to cities on methane gas. There's still more work to be done. If we don't fund these positions, we're not going to be able to do the work, and we're not going to be able to help our community get the support they need, or help get the funding to our community to help filter out to businesses, builders, and our community. We have so much to do around emissions and exposures. What I'm really concerned about is not doing our part. I wish there was a way we could work with the state to identify a pathway for reducing solid waste costs for seniors. But the only other way we have is to go into a contract with a garbage company, a solid waste company. So that these are things that these managers can, department heads will be able to help us kind of work through. I'm comfortable to move forward, and I think we've talked many of these issues to great ends, but I also do think that we heard some opportunities through Puget Sound Energy to bring a tax relief program to our community and a utility rebate program to our community at greater contact. So I support moving forward, and I'm ready to call the question.
Any further comment? Seeing none. Chair would entertain a motion to authorize additional expenditures in 2023 and 2024, including 3 new full-time positions as shown in attachment 1 to the agenda bill.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve additional expenditures in 2023 and 2024, including 3 new full-time positions as shown in attachment 1 to the agenda bill, seconded by Deputy Mayor O'Kane. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
No.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 6 yeses and 1 no, the motion passes.
Chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 23-0570, increasing the utility tax levy on the privilege of carrying on the business of selling, furnishing, or transmitting natural gas in the city of Kenmore.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to adopt ordinance number 23-0570, increasing the utility tax levy on the privilege of carrying on the business of selling, furnishing, or transmitting natural gas in the city of Kenmore, seconded by Councilmember Kugler. Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 6 yeses and 1 no, the motion passes.
The chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 23-0571, establishing and levying a utility tax on the privilege of conducting a solid waste collection services business in the city of Kenmore.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to adopt ordinance number 23-0571, establishing and levying a utility tax on the privilege of conducting a solid waste collection services business in the city of Kenmore, seconded by Deputy Mayor O'Kane. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
Nope.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 6 yeses and 1 no, the motion passes.
Chair would entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 23-393, authorizing the increase in the annual vehicle fee in the city of Kenmore from $20 to $40.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to adopt resolution number 23-393, authorizing an increase in the annual vehicle fee in the city of Kenmore from $20 to $40, seconded by Councilmember Kugler. Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
All right. Next item on the agenda, transit-oriented development ordinance presented by, oh, it is 9 o'clock. Thank you very much, Councilmember Shrubnik. Unless there's any objections, the council will recess for 5 minutes. We'll come back at 9:12. All right, the Kenmore City Council will come to order. Next on the agenda is Transit-Oriented Development Ordinance presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent and Principal Planner Lori Anderson.
So before I turn this over to Lori, I just have one thing to say is that we need council direction on a couple of items this evening so we can bring forward an ordinance in March. And that ordinance will reflect the direction you gave us in November. There's a couple of things tonight. So I'm going to turn this over to Lori so she can describe what direction we're looking for.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Herbig and members of the City Council. So as Debbie mentioned, last November, November 28th, you provided direction to staff on the TOD ordinance. And you'll recall that the basic direction was to carve out, that's what we've called it, a number of parcels along the Swamp Creek corridor and to leave the current rules in effect in that carve out until a Swamp Creek corridor analysis could be done to determine whether standards should be changed for environmental reasons in that area. And there's a map in your packet, it's attachment 1, that shows that carve out area, the parcels that were not going to be impacted by the new rules. So in the area outside of the carve out, you requested only one change from the Planning Commission's recommendation. And that was a change to require non-residential uses on the ground floor of buildings fronting State Route 522. So we moved forward and started developing the ordinance and ran into some inconsistencies that we thought we needed to bring back to you. And also we're bringing forward the language about the non-residential uses. So with your permission, I'll start with the carve out regulations and talk about the staff recommendations for that.
Yeah, and how do you want to take feedback? Do you want to give a full
Yeah, I was thinking I would divide it into the 2 sections. First, talk about the carve out regulations, and then second, talk about the regulation about non-residential uses, if that's
perfect.
Okay, all right. So the inconsistencies are shown in attachment 2 to your packet. I can call it up if you'd like me to. But what we did in that attachment was first we identified the things that we really thought you meant that should not apply in the carve out. And those were things like density and height. But then we ran into a number of other amendments that were part of this packet that we did not think you intended to exempt the carve out parcels from. And I'll give you some examples. For example, we in many places changed the name of downtown design standards just to design standards. And because our design standards apply in a number of different places beyond downtown. If we did not get your concurrence to leave those changes in, we would have to write an exception in every one of those sections that says this rule does not apply on these 10 parcels. I can't remember exactly how many parcels. And instead you need to go back to and then cite the existing code section. You can see how cumbersome that would be, when in reality, I don't think that changing the word downtown design standards just to design standards was what the council had in mind with the carve out. Another example, and a more significant example, has to do with the affordable housing definitions. The amendments changed those definitions to match match language in the comprehensive plan, but also county and state affordable housing definitions. If we exempt the carve out from those regulatory changes, then we have 2 different affordable housing standards in the city. Again, I don't think that's necessarily what the council had intended. So staff had identified the changes, the ones that we think you did intend to apply, and the ones that perhaps you did not intend to apply. And our recommendation is that we write the ordinance to reflect those 2 sets of directions. So I'm happy to go through attachment 2 if you would like. Otherwise, I would need council direction on whether you support the staff recommendations in attachment 2.
Do we have any questions about the recommendations in attachment 2? I have one. In the list of things that you wanted to exempt the carve out from, where'd it go? Restrictions on drive-through service.
Right.
That one kind of jumped out at me because I thought we already, oh, yeah, because I thought we already had through previous rules on 522 kind of done away with any new drive-throughs.
Not in the urban corridor zone.
So why
on
would
the
we
east
exempt,
side.
why would we exempt that?
I assumed that that was a change that the council was not necessarily supportive of. You certainly could make a different decision. If you wanted, even in the carve out for drive-throughs to be prohibited, I could support that perspective. I was just trying to, in my own mind, weigh where I thought you might fall out. And that was a fairly significant use change to that area.
Yeah, I personally, I had assumed that we had done that to all of 522. So my, my bad on that. But if we have the opportunity to do that now, I personally would like to see no new drive-throughs going in. I would hate for us to do this and then have somebody redevelop, I don't know, the Starbucks or something and turn into a drive-through bank or something. Those uses really do drive down the pedestrian friendliness of an area and further kind of cement our dependency on cars. And I would like to see that part taken out personally. Deputy Mayor?
I support that.
Okay. I'm not seeing any.
Great. Okay, so the restriction on drive-through service, we will make that apply even in the carve out.
Any other questions, comments? I'm not seeing anybody else raising their hand. Does Councilmember File have her hand up? No, okay. I'm not seeing anybody else wishing to speak right now, which I think is Deputy Mayor.
Apologies for a little fluff, but I'm excited to see this carve out come back today. Thank you for your efforts on this. I'm not going to go too far. We'll do it when the ordinance comes, but I am excited about this, so thank you.
All right, do you need formal direction or do you feel
I think
okay at this
that
point?
This is fine. We'll be bringing back the ordinance, as Debbie said, on March 13th. But this will help me write the ordinance in a more sensible way than I started out writing it. Okay, so the second question for the evening, this was direction from the council, was to require non-residential uses on the ground floor of buildings that face SR 522. This is in the urban corridor zone, which again is east of 73rd Avenue Northeast. To do this, I used a model from language in the downtown commercial zone, where in some areas we have this similar requirement, which is to say that a minimum of 80% of the structure's street front facade at street level shall be occupied by non-residential, and that means retail, office, or service uses. And then there's a depth specified, so you can't get around the rules by creating a 5 foot deep. I don't know what that would look like, but anyway, it's you can average it and maybe get to a minimum of 15 in some parts, but primarily it's would be at 30 feet. And then we changed SR 522 to street frontages, because we know that, for example, in the transportation element, there's a new street proposed that would run through the urban corridor area. And we didn't want to restrict this requirement only to SR 522, but actually to any street frontage that would be in the area to enhance the pedestrian friendliness along the street. And then the one other caveat, which the council did not discuss, was the creation of an exception for projects, multifamily structures containing 100% affordable housing. This was something that one of the developers on our developer panel from last year contacted me about, and then was telling me that the financing of these kinds of projects is made much more difficult if there's a non-residential component involved. I went to a regional coalition for housing, ARCH, to verify that they too felt that that was an issue. And Lindsay Masters confirmed that requiring this in a 100% affordable housing project could be a barrier. So the exception is written here and the council can determine whether they feel comfortable with that. So what I'm looking for tonight is whether you are comfortable with expanding it from SR 522 to all street frontages, whether you're comfortable with the standard, which again mirrors something in the downtown commercial zone, and whether the exception for a 100% affordable housing project is acceptable.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
I have one question about a couple of those, or two questions total. On the affordable, what do we mean by affordable? So that's the first question.
Right. It is affordable housing units are defined in the regulations, and there are moderately affordable, very low income, and extremely low income.
Right.
So
In the
we-
context of, you know, waiving this.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
We're just saying generally affordable housing.
So any of those.
So any of those.
That's what I was
If-
trying to get
right.
at. Yeah. Okay.
If
So
you wanted
anything
to make it
80% or.
more restrictive, then you.
No,
could
no,
do that.
I just wanted to know
Yeah,
how we're, yeah.
okay.
Okay, so that's the first question. The second question is, well, I would love to expand it to both sides, both streets. I'm just thinking about if we want structured parking. So you have a building and people have to get into the parking
Right.
at ground level. I mean, that takes up a side. So how,
Well, for
how would that
example,
actually work, I
Yeah.
guess?
So if you had you had SR 522, and then you had a parallel street that ran through
Mhm.
the area, which is kind of what's envisioned. If it were a single building, you'd have to have non-residential on the two sides. You still could access either on the east or the west side if you had parking behind. That would be an option. Or depending on the size of your building, the 80% allowance would allow 20% of the facade still available, for example, for a parking entrance. It sort of depends on the size of the building.
Councilmember Kugler.
I'm very supportive of that idea of having commercial on street level on all side street frontage on both sides. I actually reached out to staff about this idea before I realized it was on the agenda bill, and was just worried about the idea of having just street frontage along 522, which is not a very walkable road. So I think this helps with that. What I was wondering is, so this would only happen like as part of an entire plan, or once the streets are built, like at what point would this go into effect?
It would go into effect when you had a frontage. It wouldn't have to be developed frontage. For example, if an easement were taken or property were dedicated for a future road, I think it would apply then. But you wouldn't, if you weren't against a street or either a dedicated frontage or an easement, it wouldn't apply. See what I'm saying? So if somebody came and they didn't dedicate the street across the property, it wouldn't apply. The street has to exist in some form.
Okay, yeah, and the easement makes sense.
Mhm.
And it really wouldn't kick in until a parcel is redeveloped. Right. Any other comments or questions on this part of it? Councilmember File.
So I also do support commercial business of multiple types surrounding the bottom floor of a business, not just on one side or two sides. I think if we have to think about future forward, 50 years, 60 years from now, and growth, we have to plan for it today. I'm comfortable if we move forward with this, if that's the plan, clarity. But I don't want to see less than that.
Any other comments? I'm also supportive of the direction you're going here. I think both sides of the street make sense, especially when we're creating new interior streets to make them walkable, to make them welcoming to folks. I think having frontages that aren't blank and aren't residential is key, I think. So.
One point of clarification, thinking about Councilmember Kugler's question, I need to go back and look at the street frontage dedication and be absolutely sure that if an easement were dedicated for a future road improvement, that condition would apply. So I will make sure that the language ultimately speaks either to a dedicated roadway or to an easement for a future improvement of a roadway.
Do you feel like you have what you need from us? I think everybody's.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for all the work you've put into this. We really appreciate it. Staff reports, American Rescue Plan Act updates on homelessness response and human services presented by Assistant to the City Manager, Garrett Oppenheim.
Garrett, your microphone.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm here tonight just to give you a little update on the ARPA programs, the Homelessness Response Pilot Program, and the Human Services Funding. I'll start with the Homelessness Response Pilot Program. We went through an RFP process back in November and December, and we selected Lake City Partners Ending Homelessness as our partners for this project. As you can see, they have significant experience with the issue and knowledge about this local area and the resources that are available. We have negotiated a draft scope of work and agreed to that. And the contract will come before you guys on February the 27th, and we hope that the contract will begin on March the 1st. The plan is for Lake City Partners to assign an outreach specialist to the city of Kenmore. And the scope of work includes, well, the highlights are urgent response to requests from city, police, and community members, although that's not meant to be an emergency service. It's more about identification, outreach, and referrals. The outreach specialist will also be engaging in active engagement at the Camp United We Stand and other locations around the city. They'll be going to the community court on a weekly basis. They'll be doing community-based case management and shelter and housing navigation, and we're going to receive bi-monthly written reports from them. Before I move on to the next program, are there any questions on this one?
Councilor Sharpneck?
Yeah, this program, is that what you're talking about? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, and I put it in an email as well. I just, I believe this is something like a halftime person. I was hoping it would, for that kind of money, might be a little bit more than that, but I just want to make sure the person doesn't get stuck going to a specific site like United We Stand. Well, that's, it's a temporary encampment. And so, what I think we're looking for is somebody who will do, outreach in the community more broadly to places where folks who are homeless tend to hang out. parks, open space, hangar, library. There's several places. And so, maybe working with folks who have eyes on to locate those locations, and, doing more assertive outreach. And then embedding themselves in the larger, referral network, so that, of course, working with Lake City partners is great, but there's an entire system in terms of homelessness response. So if they can really leverage the entire system and not just one provider in terms of who they're referring to, I think that would make it even more effective. I'm excited about this starting, and I hope that maybe we can get a report, maybe within 6 months of, the productivity, how many people that they've outreached, how many people that they've held place, how many police referrals, just sort of who they're getting referrals from, who they're referring to, that kind of a thing. So that'd be really helpful. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I can read off, we have listed out a lot of the things that we're going to get in those bi-monthly reports. And some of them are just going to be things like total number of engagements, number of unique individuals engaged, first-time engagements, follow-up engagements, the outcomes of engagements. They're going to be doing rounds through the city, like you say, looking for people to engage with, and they're going to give us current hotspot locations and a list of agencies to whom they're referring people. So that would be mental health and homelessness, things like that. And they're very embedded in the King County Regional Homelessness Authority system. So I think that it's going to be great for the whole region, really, just reporting data and learning lots of new things about what's going on.
Any other questions on this portion? Not seeing any.
Okay. Next up, we have the human services funding. So back in May, there was $250,000 authorized for this. We are partnering with a couple of different organizations. The first one we're going to talk about here is the Center for Human Services, and this will be the bulk of the where the funding goes. We're partnering with them on a program that is going to provide mental and behavioral health and substance abuse counseling. The plan right now, and this is still in motion, so we're hoping that this is how it settles, but the plan is to have them place a therapist in probably Kenmore Middle School for 3 days a week and provide services exclusively to students on those days, and then find another location in the city. And we've engaged with Bestier, and if that doesn't work out, we have some other ideas, but to make their services available to the entire community for 2 days a week. So focusing on students for 3 days and then the rest of the community on 3 days a week. The plan is for that program to run through the 23-24 and 24-25 academic years. And then we're going to look for other funding to keep it going if we determine that that's a successful program. Any questions about this program before I move on?
Questions? Councilmember Sharpneck?
Sorry, I seem to be the only one with questions. How does this relate to this? I think this is the first time I've really appreciated that this is going to be school-based. So how does this relate to the existing school counselors and the school-based mental health services that are already in place?
Yeah, so there is what they call an expert therapist at the schools, and they provide more like drop-in therapy. This would be for more ongoing therapy and counseling that they just don't have capacity to do.
Councilmember Kugler. Microphone.
Oh,
sorry.
Sorry. I mean, I'm excited to be providing mental and behavioral health and substance abuse counseling here in Kenmore. I'm just curious about its location on Bestier. Is there a preference? I mean, is there like priority for students in that case, or do they already have their own on-site counseling and this is going to like be an additional supplement to that?
They have counseling, but it's only in the, I think it's the U district. They have a mental health counseling. So there's nothing in this community. So this would be new for Bestier, but it would be a CHS therapist working out of a Bestier office. And it would, while the services would be available to Bestier's faculty, students, staff, this would be for everyone in Kenmore.
Okay. And is this like drop-in care or like a referral service, do you know, for ongoing mental health support and services?
I don't know the answer to that specifically at this point. We're still sort of in the early going of crafting this.
Okay.
Councilmember Sharpnack?
All right, I'm still absorbing. I apologize. I should have been more looking at this more carefully earlier. I guess I mean, I really do want to have behavioral health services in our community. I am still a little bit struggling, maybe in the same way that Councilmember Kugler is, with the locations, the kind of citing of this. The schools have SBIRT for a reason, and the reason is that there is an existing behavioral health system out there, and SBIRT connects people to it. I am a bit concerned about going down the road of us providing behavioral health services on an ongoing basis. We're never going to fill that gap. And that's why it's a regional system. I think what we could do is, again, kind of extend the ability of various sites, Bastyr be another one, of connecting people to services, and making them aware of services that are free and low cost, for example. You know, if you're talking about placing someone in a school and having them do ongoing counseling, they're going to be almost immediately full to 100% of their capacity, and that's it. Seeing very, very few people. So I guess I'm stewing about that a little bit. Is this something that the schools have specifically asked for, that they see as a gap, or how did we land on this model?
No. This model was based on a program that Bothell has been running for the past year, funded through their ARPA allocation.
Okay.
Also partnered with Center for Human Services out of their schools. It's been very successful. And this was sort of Center for Human Services idea for how we could run a similar program here in Kenmore.
And successful, how are they articulating that they were successful? What did that mean?
I would have to go back and talk to the folks in Bothell again about how they were defining success.
Councilmember File?
Thank you. So I can see why you would have the behavioral health specialist placed in the school, given the expert is usually in this case, a doctoral expert, educational psychologist, more or less, that usually oversees the testing and support of students. And I know that North Shore did place in counselors in their schools, and they are maxed. I know why it's important. And we hear from our community, our families, the state of mental health and well-being, and how much is needed in our schools. So I absolutely can support it. I would like to see, I love the idea that there's a plan to place a therapist at Bastyr, but I would like to at least see one location within 2 blocks of 522 in a targeted universal approach pathway, so that it has greater accessibility, because that is a best quality standard. It could take place at a library, or it could take place at maybe a host site at through a partnership of Evergreen Health. Just a couple ideas to throw out there. But are any of the dollars we have received for addressing the opioid epidemic able to be allocated in these areas? Because our police are responding to double opioid crises at this point. So we need to be doing something more.
I'm unfamiliar with the opioid money and how that's being spent, so I can't speak to that.
I think it's a Chief Moen issue, as that the funding came through their pathway. But it does kind of, I think, may fit into this conversation.
I'm not even frankly sure if that settlement's been completely finalized yet. And if so, I'm not even sure if the money has changed hands yet, but it was fairly recent. Councilmember Kugler, did you have a comment?
In response to that, I think just a comment to Mr. Oppenheim. I think we're throwing out a lot of questions because I think as we're seeing the details of this, it's very apparent that this could easily be filled in a matter of minutes. I mean, just mental health counseling probably could be filled, 3 days a week easily by a city of our size. And so I don't know how many staff or actual people that this is supporting, but being that it's mental and behavioral health and substance abuse counseling, it just seems like so massive. So that's why I'm sort of curious about the more specifics. I mean, just thinking about my knowledge and experience of mental health counseling is even limited. I would say, most people, unless it's like mental health, like first aid, need a treatment plan, which is like multiple visits over a long period of time. So I guess at whatever time that you have more details, I think I'd be interested in getting more details. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall?
Yeah, thank you for the proposal. I certainly see the need, especially when it's placed at a school that receives most of our low-income students. It's Kenmore Middle School. It involves our youth who are still recovering from not being able to go to school, and that unprecedented mental health impact upon them that we're still dealing with, and that we've seen has had a negative impact. So I fully support it and see the need for the income aspect of it and for the recent mental health aspect of it. And it's a great way for us to be out helping the youth in our community.
Any other questions or comments on this portion? Not seeing any here.
Thank you. That's a lot of good feedback on that. So we'll take that back and we'll craft that a little farther. Take that into account. The next program that we are working on, this is a pilot program that NAMI Eastside brought to us. It's a two-part program. The first would see us training some residents to be volunteers in mental health first aid. Some of the things that the training would provide are that it would show the volunteers how to recognize when people are in crisis, how to really listen to people in need and make them feel like they're seen and that they matter, and also really to give them just a warm handoff to the resources that those folks need. And it would show them how to use the kits. That is the second part of this program. So we would be stocking emergency crisis kits, which would potentially be at the Kenmore Senior Center where folks in crisis could go and pick them up. We're thinking about calling them Kenmore Cares kits. The contents haven't yet been determined, but the plan is that they would be made available during business hours to residents experiencing a mental health event or to a friend or loved one to, picking it up for that person. Some of the ideas that we have that we've seen in other similar kits are cards that would help people with grounding their emotions or dealing with specific mental health issues like depression, anxiety, loneliness, stress, or lack of motivation. Stress balls, earplugs and sleep masks to aid in blocking out disruptive or uncomfortable lights or sounds, and cards that include local mental health resources and how to access them.
Any questions, comments? Not seeing any.
Okay. So my next slide is a timeline of when we hope to have these programs up and running. Or just making progress on them. So we hope to have Lake City Partners contract begin on March the 1st. And then in the spring, we want to be offering the mental health first aid training through NAMI East Side and make the emergency kits available. On July 1st, we would like for Center for Human Services contract to begin and then to begin the process of hiring so that they can have the program running in the fall. And then in July of this year, you see that we built into the contract an evaluation meeting with Lake City Partners so that we can look at the scope of work and how we can potentially improve it and make revisions to the contract over the last 3 quarters of its run.
Any questions on the timeline? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, City Manager Rob Carr-Lindsay with the ominous other.
You know, I'm going to have other be nothing tonight, just
Love
for the
that.
sake of getting out of here sooner.
All right, Councilmember reports and comments. Councilmember Marshall.
Yes, I just want to urge our mayor and Councilmember Baker and anybody else who I've missed who's going down to Olympia in terms of your advocacy for Kenmore, go forth and get great things done. Had some sobering news about our sidewalk state of affairs, but we're early on. I think we're going to keep up the advocacy to see what we can do to make it happen. Thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
Nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Nothing to add.
Councilmember File.
Nothing to add.
Deputy Mayor.
I'll stick with the theme with nothing to add. Thank you.
Well, now I feel like the jerk. I'm going to try to keep it short because I'm actually trying to get to Rite Aid before they close to pick up something. 2 things. Well, one thing. On Saturday, I was over at the hangar and I saw that there's a group that is usually there right about and wrapping up right about maybe when we would be starting Coffee with Council traditionally. And spoke with them a little bit. And they made a request of me and I said that I would run it by everybody else. They were requesting that we be willing to move our Coffee with Council at 9:30. That would give them time to clear out and be out of our way and not disrupt. I guess they've been meeting for years at that spot on Saturday mornings. Yeah. Or at least since we reopened from the pandemic. And they've been meeting around the area since then. But they were a little, they were caught off guard when I told them that we were going to be using it on Saturday. We don't allow folks to do reservations that early on a Saturday. I was just looking through our current facility use policy for the hangar. So they never had an opportunity to actually reserve it for their use, and they've been using it kind of ad hoc. I don't see any harm to bumping back our start time to 9:30. Personally, I'd be fine with that. I wanted to see what other people said. We could do it as early as this Saturday because we still can email folks out. Councilmember File, do you have your hand up?
I do. I personally don't have any problem moving back the time frame, but I would also say that the building has multiple locations that could be used for Coffee with the Council, and has in the past. So I don't know that it's too much of a hindrance. I mean, given that we've had it near the fireplace, we've had it at the side tables or the small room. I mean, there's really a lot of opportunity.
You're not wrong, except that they tend to use most of the chairs and there aren't a lot of available chairs until they're done with their meetings most Saturdays, in my experience. which is a small thing we could address with folding chairs. Councilmember Shrubnik.
When are they done? I thought
They're
they're
usually,
done at
they
9,
wrap up
right?
right around 9,
Yeah,
but then
so-
there's a bunch of hubbub and all of that. And
Above in the main room.
Councilor Marshall.
Oh, I'm okay either way. I always like a later start.
Can we use our microphones for this part?
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Okay either way, but I always like a later start time.
Councilor Kugler, were you reaching for your mic?
Yeah, I'm fine with 9:30 or.
I'm fine with 9:30 too.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. So if we could send a note out to our list advising of a 9:30 start time for this Saturday, that would be wonderful. And yes, as Councilor Marshall said, I will be down in Olympia with Councilor Baker. We'll be talking to some key members about the Plymouth project as well as the city's legislative agenda, which includes the 61st sidewalks and the funding there, and making sure they get funded before 2035. Anyway, thank you, everyone. With nothing more to come before us, the Kenmore City Council stands adjourned.